Chapter 6 My Education Begins. Matilda O'Donnell personal note. By the 15 days after rescuing Arrow from the crash site, I was able to communicate fluidly and effortlessly with her in English. She had absorbed so much written material by this time that her academic education far exceeded my own. Although I graduated from high school in Los Angeles in 1940 and attended college for 4 years of pre-medical and nursing training, the variety of my own reading have been fairly limited. I had not studied most of the subject to which Errol had not been exposed, especially concerning her acute understanding, very intense study habits, and an eerie photographic memory. She was able to recall long passages from books she read. She was especially fond of sections of her favorite stories from classic literature, like The Adventure of Huckleberry Finn, footnote 46, Tales from Gulliver's Travels, footnote 47, and Peter Pan, footnote 48, as The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, footnote 49. By this time Arrow had become the teacher, and I was the student. I was about to learn what men of Earth do not know and had no way to knowing. The throne of scientist and agent who observed us through the one-way glass of interview room, whom Errol and I now referred to as the gallery, were growing impatiently impatient to ask her questions. But Errol confused to refuse to all any questions to be asked of her by anyone other than myself, either vicariously through me, as an interpreter or in writing. On the afternoon of the sixth day, Errol and I sat next to each other as she read. She closed the last page of a book she was reading and placed it aside. I was about to hand her the next book from the large pile waiting to be read, where she turned and said or thought to me, "I'm ready to speak now." At first I was a little confused by the remark. I gestured for her to continue, and she began to teach me my first lesson. Official transcript of interview. Top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army, Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, 519th Bob Grump, subject alien interview, 24/7, 1947, first session. What would you like to say, Errol? I asked. I have been a part of the Domain Expeditionary Force in this sector of space for several thousand years. However, I have not personally had intimate contact with beacons on Earth since 5965 BCE. It is not my primary function to interact with inhabitants of planets within the domain. I'm an officer, pilot, and engineer with many duties to perform. Nonetheless, although I am fluent in 347 other languages within the domain, I had not been exposed to your English language. The last Earth language with which I was conversed was the Sanskrit language of the Vedic hymns. Footnote 50. Na sadasim no sadasim tadanim Nasera chono vyoma paroyate Iwari wa kuhyagashya sharamane. Okay, we continue. This is Nasade Sukta, Vedic hymns. I know Sanskrit. It is true, guys. It is true. I know Sanskrit. If you know Sanskrit, we can speak. At that time, I was member of a mission sent to instigate the loss of the domain base located in the Himalaya mountains. As entire battalion of officers, pilots, communications, and administrative personnel disappeared and the base destroyed. Several years ago, I was trained and served as an investigation, data evaluation, and program development officer of the domain. Because I was experienced in that technology, I was sent to Earth as part of the such team. One of my duties involved interrogation of the human population that inhabited the adjoining area at that time. Footnote 51. Maybe of the people in that region reporting sighting Vimans or spacecraft in the area. Footnote 52. Following the logical extension of evidence, testimony, observation, as well as the absence of certain evidence, I led my team to the discover that there were still old Empire ships and well-hidden old Empire installations in this solar system, of which we had been completely unaware. You and I were unable to communicate in your language because I personally have not been exposed to your language. However, now that I have scanned the book and material you provide me, this data has been relayed to our space station in this region and processed by our communications officers through our computers. It has been translated into my own language and relayed back to me in a context that I can think with. I have also received additional information from the files stored in our computers about the English language and domain records concerning Earth civilization. Footnote 53. Now I am prepared to give you certain information that I feel will be of great value to you. I tell you the truth. Although truth is relative to all other truths, I wish to share with you as honestly and accurately as possible truth as I see it, within the boundaries of my integrity to myself, to my race, and without vaulting to my obligations to the organization and serve and has sworn to uphold and protect. Okay, I thought. Will you answer questions from the gallery now? No, I will not answer questions. I will provide information to you that I think will be beneficial to the well-being of the immortal spiritual beings who comprise humanity, and that will foster the survival of all the myriad life forms and the environment of Earth. And this is part of my mission to ensure the preservation of Earth. Personally, it is my conviction that all sentient beings are immortal spiritual beings. This includes human beings. For the sake of accuracy and simplicity, I will use a made-up word, is be, because the primary nature of an immortal being is that they live in a timeless state of is, and the only reason for their existence is that they decide to be. No matter how lovely their station in a society, every is be deserves the respect and treatment that I myself would like to receive from others. Each person on earth continues to be an ISB, whether they are aware of the fact or not. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy personal note. I will never forget this conversation. Her tone was very matter of fact and emotionless. However, for the first time, I sensed the presence of a warm and real personality in Errol. Her reference to immortal spiritual beings struck me like a flash of light in a dark room. I had never before considered that a human being could be an immortal being. I thought that status or power was reserved solely for the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And because I am devout Catholic and subject to the word of the Lord Jesus and the Holy Father, I had never thought of a woman as an immortal spiritual being either, not even the Holy Mother Mary. Yet when Errol thought that thought, I became vividly aware, for the very first time, that she personally was an immortal spiritual being, and so are we all. Errol said that she sensed that I was confused about the idea. She said she would demonstrate to me that I'm so an immortal spiritual being. She said, "Be above your body." Immediately I realized that I was outside of my body, looking down from my ceiling at the top of my body's head. Footnote 54. I was also able to see the room around me, including Errol's body sitting in the chair next to my own body. After a moment, I realized the simple but shocking reality that I'm not a body. In that moment, a black veil lifted, and for the first time in my life, and for a very long time into the past, I realized that I'm not my soul, but that I'm me, a spiritual being. This was his unexplainable epiphany, But one fills me with a joy and relief I cannot recall having experienced ever before. As for the immortal part, I do not understand in her meaning, as I have always been taught that I am not immortal, a spirit perhaps, but certainly not immortal. After a moment, I'm not sure how long, Arrow asked me if I had a better understanding of the idea. Suddenly I was back inside my body again, and said out loud, "Yes, I see what you mean." I was so taken aback by the experience that I had to get up from my chair and walk around the room for a few minutes. I made an excuse that I needed to get a drink of water and go to the restroom, which I did. In the restroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. I used the toilet to refresh my makeup and straightened my uniform. After 10 or 15 minutes, I left more normal again and returned to the interview room. After that, I felt as though I was no longer just an interpreter for Errol. I felt as though I was a kindred spirit. I felt like I was safe, at home, with a trusted friend or family member, as close as any I have never had. Errol sensed and understood my confusion about the concept of personal immortality. She began her first lesson with me by explaining this to me. Official transcript of interview continued. Errol told me her reasons for coming to Earth and for being in the area of the 509th Bomber Squadron. She was sent by her superior officers to investigate the explosions of nuclear weapons which have been tested in New Mexico. Her superiors ordered her to gather information from the atmosphere that could be used to determine that the extent of radiation and potential harm this might cause in the environment. During her mission, the spacecraft was struck by a lightning, footnote 55, which caused her to lose control and crash. The spacecraft is operated by SBs who use doll bodies, in much the same way that an actor wears a mask and costume. Is it like a mechanical tool through which to operate in the physical world? She and well as all the other SB of the officer class and their superiors inhabit these doll bodies when they are on duty in space. When they are not on duty, they leave the body and operate, think, communicate, travel, and exist without the use of body. The bodies are constructed of synthetic materials, including a very sensitive electrical nervous system, to which each is beam adjust themselves or tune in to an electronic wavelength. Footnote 56. That is matched uniquely to the wavelength or frequency emitted by each beam. Each beam is capable of creating a unique wave frequency, which identifies them, much like a radio signal frequency. This serves in part as identification like a fingerprint. The doll body acts like a radio receiver for the S-beam. No two frequencies or doll bodies are exactly the same. The bodies of each SB crew member likewise turned into and connect to the nervous system built into the spacecraft. The spacecraft is built in much the same way as the doll body. It is adjusted specifically to the frequency of each SB crew member. Therefore, the craft can be operated by the thoughts or energy emitted by the S-beam. It is really a very simple direct control system. So there are no complicated controls or navigation equipment on board the spacecraft. They operate as an extension of the S-beam. When the lightning bolt struck the spacecraft, this caused a short circuit and consequently disconnected them from the control of the ship momentarily, which resulted in the crash. Aero was, and still is, an officer, pilot, and engineer in an expeditionary force, which is part of space opera. Footnote 57. Civilization which refers to itself as the domain. This civilization controls a vast number of galaxies, stars, planets, moons, and asteroids throughout an area of space. That is approximately one-fourth of the entire physical universe. The continuing mission of her organization is to secure control It explained the territory and resources of the domain. Arrow pointed out that their own activities were very similar in many ways to the European explorers, who discovered and claimed the New World to the Holy Father, the Pope, and for the kings of Spain, Portugal, and later Holland, England, France, and so forth. Unit benefited from the property acquired for the native inhabitants. However, the native inhabitants were never consulted with or asked for their permission to become a part of the domain of European nations, and the soldiers and priests they sent to acquire territory and wealth in order to advance their interests. Arocent she read in a history book that the Spanish king regretted the brutal treatment of the native inhabitants by his soldiers. He feared retribution for the gods he worshipped, as described in the various testaments of the Bible. He asked the Pope to prepare a statement called the Requirement, footnote 58, which was supposed to be read to each of the newly encountered native inhabitants. The king hoped that the statement, whether it was accepted or rejected by the natives, would absolve the king of our responsibility for the resulting slaughter and enslavement of these people. He used this statement as justification to confiscate their lands and possessions by his soldiers and the Pope's priests. Apparently, the Pope personally did not have any feelings of guilt or responsibility in the matter. Arrow thought that such actions were those of a coward, in that it is no surprise that the territory of Spain was diminished so quickly. Only a few years later the king was dead, and his empire has been assimilated by other nations. Arrow said that this sort of behavior does not occur in the domain. Their leaders assume full responsibility from the actions of the domain, and would not denigrate themselves in this fashion. Nor do they fear any gods or have any regret from their actions. This idea reinforces my earlier suggestion that Errol and her people are probably atheists. In the case of the acquisition of Earth by the domain, the rulers of the domain have chosen not to openly reveal this intention to the native inhabitants of Earth until a later time when it may, or may not, suit them interest to reveal themselves. From the present time, it is not strategically necessary to make the presence of the domain expeditionary force known to mankind. In fact, until now, it has been very aggressively hidden, for reasons that will be revealed later. The asteroid belt near Earth is very small but important location from the domain in this part of space. Actually, some of the objects in the solar system are very valuable for use low-gravity space stations. They are interested primarily in the low-gravity satellites. In this solar system, which consists mainly of the sites of the Moon facing away from Earth, footnote 59, and the asteroid belt, which was a planet was destroyed billions of years ago, and to a lesser degree, Mars and Venus. Dome structures synthesized from gypsum, footnote 60, on antiquarian basis covered by electromagnetic force screens, footnote 61, are easily constructed to house the domain forces. Once an area of space is acquired by the domain and becomes a part of the territory under its control, it is treated as a property of the domain. The space station near the planet Earth is important only because it lay along a path of the domain expansion route toward the center of the Milky Way galaxy and beyond. Of course, everyone in the domain is aware of this, except for the people of Earth.